Good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting to order, work session June 23rd, 2025, to inform the public about the location of the Opens Meeting Act, posted in the council chambers and accessible to members of the public. Roll call, please.
Granquist,
Here.
Arns,
Here.
Webb,
Here.
McCarthy, Beckman,
Here.
Jensen, Langy,
Here.
Hildebrand.
Here.
All right. Discussion on the agenda will be to review the 2025-2035 capital improvement program, which includes the 2025-2030 1- and 6-year plan for street improvements. And Lyle will be leading the discussion.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, citizens, and staff. Folks tuning in at home, I know there's one for sure because they called and asked about it. So we're going to talk about the CIP from the email I sent out a couple weeks back, 6 weeks or so ago. I'd like to start out by saying I'm not going to get into the weeds right away. We'll let the elected officials and whatever staff want to make some notes, and I'll give kind of an overview, a spiel of it, and then we'll let you steer where we want the conversation to go. So the first question for those that are tuning in, and most of you have been through this before, Mr. Jansen is not yet, but unable to attend. This is a 10-year outlook of purchases in excess, what used to be $50,000, but now this year in excess of $100,000. So what would have been in that over $50,000 range before, making this list slightly smaller, all of those items are now moved into the divisional budgets. What's the process look like? Well, as you know, the budget gets approved in October. Very shortly after that, we start making preparations for the next budgeting process. In January, February timeframe, I'd like to have the council retreat, which is a great opportunity for whatever new elected officials and new division heads or division heads in general to get together and figure out what the division heads need that they see in their future, that they need, what the elected officials want to do with their time on council, and try and mesh and gel a product that will meet those goals and visions. After that retreat, we send out an email notification to the division heads and the divisions to basically fill in their CIPs of what they need and what the elected officials were hoping for. We get those, get the pulse on this on the elected officials. March, those submissions come back. They get kind of compiled through accounting and through Kelly, works for Stephen. Around the April timeframe, the CIP team comes together to talk about those submissions. And that CIP team primarily consists of Stephen, myself, Randy, Sheila, Scott when he can attend. Sometimes there'll be other division heads or staff that attend just for educational purposes, or maybe there's something specific in a project or a purchase that we want to make sure we're vetting all the way through. But we'll meet typically 4 or sometimes 5 times, and those meetings will be 2 to 5 hours each, depending on what they are, to review all of that. And what are we looking for? We're looking to see if take for example, police division, fire division. If one division is going to be doing a roofing project in this year and another division is doing another project a couple years later, perhaps we can combine them and get some savings that way. Or maybe there's grants that we know about that we can basically getting everything together to bring forth a good product to the best of our ability. Once we get that compiled, we do a kind of an overview with Scott. Then in this year, it came around to where you got the email from me. Well, it was coming from me. It wasn't just a me thing. It was a culmination of much of the staff input. Then May, June, we start the budgeting process. July, August, the work sessions and the public hearings. September for approval. October 1, the calendar flips to start again. I also want to say, at any point that I'm talking about any of this stuff, please feel free to interject with whatever questions or comments you might have. The next part, I'd like to talk a little bit about the anatomy of the CIP. So as you look at it, if you print it off, a lot of pages there. It can be kind of confusing and somewhat overwhelming to look at. So if you go to page 1, basically of the packet here, we're going to start in the top left corner, and you're going to see it's broken down by divisions. So starting in the top left corner, Department Administration has 1, 2, 3 projects there, or 3 items. Gives a very, very general description of what the project would be, the anticipated costs that would go along with it, and then what year those project out into. So we know any piece of equipment, anything man-made is going to run out over the course of time. So we get a dump truck, we're going to get 10 years of life expectancy out of it. That's why when you look down at streets, there's a lot of equipment that's there. And we can take our best shot at a normal life expectancy of whatever piece of equipment it's going to be. There's going to be some that are better than others, that last longer, that we can get more life out of, others that are maybe get used harder, or maybe they're lemons. And we relied on the division heads to say, okay, looking at streets since it's the first page, this dump truck is nearing the end of its life, we'd like to keep it here. Perhaps another one has a lot of life left in it, we can bump that one farther out. The next column you'll see is the extended prior to, which would be however much was spent prior to this amount, or whichever amount prior to the current time, and so on down the line. Admin first, streets, you can go through and see all of it starts with the general fund items first. This is an important element. Everything depicted there will have a funding source, or it should. If it doesn't, point it out, please. But it should have a funding source so that when the time comes that the budget rolls around that falls into, we don't have to scramble to find that money. With that being said, it's important to know that this document, we can move things on this document simply because it's a spreadsheet, but that doesn't end there. When we talk about a funding source, let's take Keno for example. If Parks is going to buy widgets, as we used in the previous example, and they're going to use Keno funds, and it's 2026, 2027, but for whatever reason we're not ready for it, we bump it back a year or need to bump it forward. That movement on this spreadsheet doesn't end here. It goes to another spreadsheet that feeds into the Keno plan and then the long-term financial plan. So that's why oftentimes when we talk about movement, we can't necessarily say, oh yeah, we can just bump that and be totally fine. We have to look at what the ramifications are. Every decision has a consequence. So if that movement takes place, what else is affected? What can't be purchased or what needs to be postponed? This spreadsheet is more of an abstract of the overall financial document versus an end-all be-all thing. That being said, yes, there is movement on this spreadsheet. It's a dynamic thing. It's been changed scores of times just over the course of the last few months. And likely we're going to change stuff again before it gets approved in September, based on perhaps some of the conversation that we have today or information that we learn over the next few months. It'll become finalized when you approve it in September. But then, like I said, we start again. On page 9 of 20 is where the enterprise stuff fund starts. Another thing that people often find interesting is the CHAF fund, City and Highway Allocation Fund. That's on the bottom of page 14. So for the citizens that are wanting to know when their street projects are going to be done, or this, that, the other thing, that's the place to find that. Another thing to note with this one is on page 17. We started a couple years ago, I think, based off of Mayor's encouragement, Mayor Clausen, to break down by funding source. So instead of seeing just divisional purchases and how they're being paid for, and as you note as you look through here, some projects, take this one for example right now, 24 in CHAF, it's going to have a couple different funding sources. Now on page 17, we have items that are broken down by funding source, listing the divisions and projects after that. One might think that this is everything for all purchases going forward within the next 10 years. It's not. It's just the purchases that we know we have identified funding sources for. So take, for example, we don't know when the time's going to be, but if a Fire Station 3 comes along, we don't necessarily have a funding source for that. If it was a sales tax thing, a sales tax would be driven by the citizens or approved by the citizens, so it's not depicted on here yet. There's a few other things that are included: property acquisitions, building projects, public safety components that we know will be needed in the future, but are not necessarily depicted in the CIP, you see in front of you. So if you're looking at it right now and you're comparing it to what we sent out 6 weeks ago or so, there have been a few changes on there as well. So with that being said, that's the general overview of the CIP. Let's get into some questions. As you looked at this from the previous email that we sent and that you saw the packet here, what catches your eye? What do you want to talk about? What do you have questions? What do you want us to concentrate on?
Lyle, tell me what other funds is, if that's a funding source.
Could be grant funds. Or not grants, donations, I should say, like Kohler and what's the other one that Parks just got? Hanson? Was that, there was some donation?
Yeah, the Kohler Complex.
Kohler Complex, and it's a catch-all for stuff that doesn't fit necessarily in one of these other categories.
But I see fire engine, fire tanker, heavy rescue truck, all have OFs by them if I look back on page 19. And then, I mean, that's just that one, but I also
Yep.
see it in different things like Frog Creek Sewer Extension, Highway 35 Interceptor, Elmo Avenue Lift Station, as I look through different pages, so I don't know how some of those things could fall under other funds. West Norfolk Wetland Bank, East Regional Wetlands.
I'll answer those pertaining to Public Works. Generally, it's meaning we're not 100% sure that it's going to be a grant or capital contribution, and so we're just showing it as other funds. Most likely it'd be some combination thereof. So Omaha Lift Station, that would only go on the ground if those, if we don't identify those other funds, either as, they could be revenue bond. We're intending them not to be revenue bond by showing them as other funds. We're intending here to depict that to move that project forward, we would need to identify either an industrial, something industrial's coming in, subdivisions coming in, and we're able to work through and negotiate some sort of a funding stream to pay. Maybe it is a revenue bond, but it's going to be paid through, per se, some TIF revenue or something that's coming in. So we're showing
It's
that
not
as,
really other, it's unknown.
it's unknown. That would
Word
be,
it correctly, it should be worded different. It's unknown.
unknown is not a category
No,
we have.
but
So-
other is not correct,
So,
because other is unknown.
Right, I mean,
It's
it
unknown to us,
is,
it's unknown constituents, it's unknown to everybody.
So
Right.
potentially, if it's
It's-
listed as other, then it's unfunded.
it is unfunded.
right,
It
so
is unfunded.
It could be
So it
something that
shows-
probably can't take place without the approval of elected officials, plus it may
Correct.
not find a funding source and it may get kicked down the line
Right.
even further, so.
If there is,
Possibly.
if the funding source doesn't show up, then the project doesn't occur.
And that's in one example. The other one, like in fires here, is other funds. In this case, is rural money coming in for it. So to say we can change all other funds to unknown funds, maybe we could add an unknown funds, but there's like Chief Rogge's rural fire money coming in. It's known where it's coming from. So we can't paint the whole canvas with one brush. Sure, no, that's,
Especially when you have high dollar amounts being looked at, or low dollar amounts being looked at.
Right. Because in some cases, in many cases in the public works side, like the Omaha lift station, that particular project, a project that we've talked a lot about as a community. The need for the project, I think is unquestionable. And so it does need to be in the 10-year plan. It probably does need to be roughly where it is in the 10-year plan. And as it kind of gives us direction too, that as we're working on that east side of the community, we need to be aware that if we're going to plug an industry somewhere or plug a subdivision somewhere or whatever we're doing, we need to be having conversations around funding that.
I want to add a couple more things as well. That's a great question. I appreciate you bringing it up, because if you're wondering, I'm sure others were as well. Just like I'm talking about this, and I sent the email, it may look like I'm the subject matter expert on this, but I'm not. I'm just merely delivering the message. But there's an incredible amount of knowledge and experience that leads to this each time. So we can get into the weeds of it. I might not know. We'll just call the division head up.
Well, what is staff looking for from us? Because essentially, obviously we look at the budget and we're looking at numbers. We don't really get a chance to dive into what every department needs or what they have to keep operating. That's up to the department heads to present that. So really for us, we're looking at your grand total on page 23, or I'm sorry, page 20. And then we've got expenditures that are moving over of 4,500,000. And then we've got expenditures we'll be expected to approve this next fiscal budget reading, which is 11,952,000. So do we just need to dive into those two categories as of this evening? Because I really don't know how we can go through department by department by department, their capital improvement plans. But
Right, so.
we obviously don't know exactly what each department needs. This meeting could last for,
Right,
Yeah.
so
so I'm not sure what exactly the
my
intent.
hope, my hope on this, and what I understood and from past years was, as we present this, sometimes it's been consumed, or we get comments back, or maybe you guys are getting comments back that it's done. Here it is, it's done. We can review it, we can answer questions around it, but it's done. We really wanted to send this out early this year, get this out in early May to you. I've got a list here, and I couldn't exactly tell you, but this was the list of stuff by ward that we had talked about at the strategic planning meeting back in May. Were there things on here that were a function of that strategic planning conversation that to you are a priority that may not be here? Maybe we didn't message that real clearly, but that was my goal, was if this, in your opinion, if this is reflecting, through looking through there, if there wasn't something that jumped out at you that was sort of this, maybe this hanging conversation, then we probably accomplished the task. But if there was something in there that was missing, we wanted you to have the opportunity to say, gap paving, Washington Avenue. Steve, would really like to see Washington Avenue paved. Can we get that in? Those types of opportunities, so.
Sure. I think I guess, is there a way to look at the portion of the 4.5 million or 4.6 million for that need to carry over to the next fiscal? What portion of that 4.6 million is carryover funds that will be carried from this year, next year, and what portion of that is being spent before the end of this fiscal? So we know exactly what's being carried over to the 11,952,000. And then of that 11,952,000 being approved in this coming budget reading, which portion of those are being carried out, being kicked out for the next 5, 4, 3, 1, or maybe 1 year, 2 years? What percentage is that? And then what is the hard cost going into this year's budget that's being expended now, if that makes sense? I mean, some of those are long-term like the 200,000 come into council priority dollars. I see that's 200,000 forever. Just kind of goes like that. So if you take the 200,000 out of there, and then you take, because that's carryover. You take out I see that in 2026, we have mobile data computer upgrades, say 230,000. That is being kicked out of next year's fiscal to the next year's fiscal to next year's, what do I make sense? So we can dial in on what exactly needs to be spent, and then what's being spent. Because what gets a little bit confusing is, okay, we're approving 11.9 million, but what are we actually working on this fiscal? We can go through that, but then you look at the next fiscals, and what of that portion is being, if I'm streets, what am I kicking down the road out of that? And then because all of a sudden it jumps to the next fiscal and it's at 12,814. Well, what percentage of that 12 million was the carryover from the previous fiscal, or is it all being spent in that fiscal? Does that make sense? It's like I'm trying to figure out how the budget works. Like, am I confusing everybody, or is you kind of following what I'm trying
Well,
to say?
it's
If it's in that 25, 26 column, you'll see that move forward into the capital outlay. If it's in that 25, 26 column, you'll see that move forward into your 25, 26 budgets that you guys will be reviewing early next month. Those numbers, there'll be $11,952,359 in the general fund, or that general fund, that's, it's sorted by funding sources, but anyway, it'll be $11,952,359 of those particular capital items in the 25, 26 budget that we're thinking we're gonna spend in 25, 26.
Yeah, but stuff pops up too. I mean, just like if
Yeah.
disease, COVID and
Right.
warfare.
So essentially,
affect
like
things.
when we go into the budget part of the meat of the meal, obviously, when we're going through the budget, we've got stuff that's coming out of general revenue, right? So then what portion of the 12 million is general revenue? It does, unless I have to go back and I have to add all that up myself, I can do that, but it just gives me a total. Does it give me the portion that's coming out of general, which we have to approve, which essentially is property tax, sales tax, general revenue? And then, obviously, we've got revenue bonds, and you go all the way through this, and then we've got council priority dollars, is up there, Keno's in there. I guess what I'm getting at is the funds that the council, that directly affect our mill levy, are probably the funding sources that we need to probably dial in on. So and then
Concentrate on.
it's just a lot, there's a lot here in front of you.
There is a lot here.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's why.
And I think every year we've always been obviously we're always, well, at least I am, I'll admit it, I get confused, it gets confusing. So over the last few years, I've been trying to dial this in so it's a little bit easier to digest and understand what am I voting on and what am I approving? And did I just approve of a 10-year obligation of funds coming out of general funds to finance something that happened in 2030 that maybe we can't finance this year and needs to kick out to 2032? I don't know. And I mean, obviously, you guys work extremely hard on this and put this together, and you've done a good job stating that this is not, and so is Steve, this is not a permanent fixture. It's a revolving budget that,
Dynamic thing.
right, yeah, essentially. So that's the thing to actually get yourself to where you want to vote on approving a budget, is kind of having those eyes, because I'm assuming everybody up here has a savings account. Okay, so kicking that out because I know I've got to spend this at this date. So that's coming out of now if something happens with my budget, we acquire something or something comes in different, well, then that changes everything. So I might call that something different, just like you are in this budget. But I think the three categories would be general revenue, council priority, and Keno. And then obviously it looks like the sales tax. So is general revenue just property tax?
It's property tax, sales tax.
NPD.
Because there's a sales tax item on here too.
What's that?
There's a sales tax item on here too.
That's just
So,
the voter
right, voter approved stuff like PD.
Okay.
And I'm gonna.
Well, can you go
So do we want to run
page
through those
18.
categories of funding sources real quick?
I might lead a little bit here for Randy and Sheila.
If you go to page 18 of the PDF on the screen, that shows the general revenues.
Page 18 of 20 shows general revenues near the bottom.
So of that, what was it, $12 million total that we were looking at spending in 25, 26? $988,797 is general revenues.
All right. And that's just general revenue.
Yes.
And then you have, do we have a, okay, that helps.
Shane, so what you're getting at is, what is the direct impact of the fiscal year coming up, 25, 26? What information in here is going to be going into the budget we'll be approving?
Right, because I think it gets tough for us as elected officials to be able to look at a projected budget
Yeah.
out 10 years.
So I
Where
believe.
we're not running those department heads, you know?
Yeah, so I'm gonna try and help paint the picture, but Randy and Sheila, this is really your wheelhouse, so just pop me on the nose. Best way to think about the CIP in terms of general revenue, just imagine that every year we put 3 million into a CIP fund of general revenue. Some years we might spend 2 million of that, but it's because in the next year we have forecasted a $4 million need. So over the 10-year period, the spending is 3 million times 10 or 30 million. But in different years, that spending it might go up and might go down. So it's not like every year you're spending the 3 million we put in. So
that's what
the
this
purpose to this is to allow us as staff to push some of those expenses forward or backward so that over the 10-year period, we don't overspend that 30 million or whatever that number is. But we don't always spend all of it in one year because we know we're going to spend more in another year. So it's a cash flow over that 10-year period, and we don't ever want the balance to go negative.
Lyle, can you just recap so people have an idea? So just what makes up the general revenue funds and what makes up the enterprise funds?
Sure. So, I'd say the three primary revenue sources for the general fund are sales tax, MPPD revenue, property tax. And then if you look in your budgets, you'll see all the revenues that are depicted there. We could go to the website in a second here and look that up, or a PDF. But there's a multitude, everything from like, dog registrations or something that PD does, bike registrations to a couple
under other-
bucks a
other,
year.
yeah.
All the way up to the biggest revenue source that we have, which is sales taxes and MPPD and property tax. And so that's what goes into that fund. When you talk about the enterprise funds, for those folks that are listening at home, their revenues do everything within their divisions. They pays whatever their user fees are for whatever that might be, pays for their staff, pays for their pipe, pays for their trucks, and so on and so forth. So they're in a little bit different ocean to swim in than the general fund. If those projects are bigger and more money's needed, user fees go up. So when we make a change, let's take that for example, in an enterprise fund to add a big piece of equipment or a big expansion, it goes into a model that they have, which is incredibly complex. This makes this look simple. And there's nobody that's going to look at this and say, this is a simple spreadsheet. And
Can you put my screen on? I think I'm plugged in. Yeah. Isn't that coming through? I was trying to show you the general fund model, but for some reason,
is it in a,
maybe I got the wrong. Let me try something else. Yep, there we go. That's me and my lovely daughter at her wedding, by the way. I just had that. what I
As
was
he's
looking
pulling that
for.
up, one thing also to consider is that dump truck that Will's gonna buy this year, maybe 150,000, but that same dump truck is not gonna be 150,000 5 years, 10 years down the road. So there's another spreadsheet that we have that includes an inflationary factor, so that when the time comes that number 7 needs to be replaced,
How do I
the
get
right
that
amount
to
of money
show?
is there.
Well, maybe for the spirit of time, we should go
Is
to
there-
page 17.
I got my spreadsheet called up, but it's not showing on the
Oh.
screen. What do you,
It's probably recognizing it's two different screens here, so if you grab it and move it to the right, there you go. So you have to,
move it all the way to the right?
double click that.
You know what, why it might help, we just start, because the breakdown that you did do for this CIP, starts on what, page 17?
The 17 was the breakdown by fund, I believe,
By funding, right?
by funding source.
Yes. So do we just want to start on page 17, go through, or wait, no, maybe it doesn't start on. What,
But
does
up
that
here,
start on page 16?
we have the spreadsheet where we're tracking those general revenues, and we're trying to level out that transfer so there's not big bumps up and down as we buy the various large capital items. And we had 1.6 million in that at the beginning of the year. And then,
He's not
He's
looking
on his
at a
own.
spreadsheet, he's not looking at part of the packet, he's looking at a spreadsheet that he works
Yes.
off of.
and then we transfer in money from the general fund. And this year, that number is 0 because we've got enough money in there that we don't need to transfer that in. And then this is the $988,797 that's shown as general revenues on your CIP spreadsheet. And then that's the ending balance that shows there for that year on the CIP spreadsheet. So we track all this out. We make sure that this ending balance number where I'm at there does not go below 0 in any year. So we can see that we're good here. It gets low, it's down to $35,000 and then $40,000 for a couple years. But we're never going to 0. So that's how we keep track of the money we put in there from property tax, for instance, NPPD, lease revenues, general revenues that go into the capital project fund. Those are probably primarily used for street equipment and some park equipment. But we track those and try and project those out 10 years like we do everything else in the long-term financial plan. And both of those numbers are shown on that CIP spreadsheet by revenue source. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's how we're tracking those.
So do we want to go to that CIP portion of this document
That's fine.
where it's tracking the revenue source and start going through that?
We
I
can go
think that would
whatever
be-
direction you want to go.
I think that'd be an easy way to start. I don't know exactly what page that is, that 16?
16 talks about chaff, top to bottom. Actually, chaff starts on page 14, and then all of page 15 and 16. After page 16, we get into breakdown of funding source, breakdown of by funding source, I should
Right,
say.
right.
Since we did the connection here. There we go.
starting on page 17, it starts saying, you know, AS total, which would be assessment totals, then it's got the CP total, council priority total, and then you go down, you got FA total,
Yep.
federal grants. Do we want to just hit those?
Yeah, we can go line by line if you want, or if there's anything in particular you want to talk about. It's probably some of the, you want to talk about the raise grant stuff a little bit? That's kind of a high dollar.
I thought you wanted to talk about general revenue.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
So we're,
So that'd be page 18.
I don't think there's any general revenue in the raise grant.
Looks like we've got a 988,000 coming up in this next year's budget, and we've got 589,000 left in this year's budget.
okay, there we go. Page 18. There we go.
And those are those two numbers I was showing you earlier on
The
that.
previous chart that Randy just had up.
Hey, Rob, on page 14, it's showing articulated machine for recycling. What is that? Or Steve, maybe you know.
It's I think it's a four-wheel forklift that twists in the middle.
What's it recycling?
It's for picking up pallets or picking up,
Oh,
These are like our full.
oh, okay.
yeah.
So we're trying to, me and Scott are just talking, what's the best way to facilitate this tonight? You know, obviously, a lot of this stuff is gonna pop up when everybody's going through their budgets. Each department goes through their budget. So some of the council that's been here a while and done this for a while, or, you know, so we can just kind of hit the key points to this, the CIP, and then, you know, get ourselves to a point where we feel comfortable moving into the budget reading. I don't know. What do you guys, how do we keep this thing?
Maybe hit, like, it's urgent, it has to be, this year,
Okay.
possibly.
I
Okay,
guess from a staff's perspective, your feedback on what you're seeing, what questions you have, what you see as important, maybe what you see as not important, is helpful for us and the division heads and how we set this up in the future. When you talk about priorities, in one of the columns here, 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth column over, in all of them, it has a project priority list, and a lot of that is based off of, we asked the division heads to say, what's your priority? As far as, is this a gotta have it thing right now, it'd be nice to have, or imperative to operations? And they'll put in their letter designation, A being the highest priority, B perhaps C, I don't know if I haven't noticed any Cs yet. But, oh yeah, there's a few Cs here on page 17. And we might modify those if the CIP team gets to it and goes, you know, this trail is important because of this, that, the other thing, we could bump that up. Or in the grand scheme of things, looking over the whole city budget, what might be important to one division head is not necessarily important for as important for everything else. So we might bump that from an A to a B or a B to a C.
And another thing, urgent doesn't necessarily mean this year either,
Right,
correct?
That's correct.
Urgent means it just needs to go on the
at some
budget.
point.
So it may be 3 years, 6 years.
Usually when we see the urgent stuff, it will be, I'm kind of struggling with an example, but plunked in a year or two out. Now, that causes problems in the financial realm. The best way that I can probably describe this is, if you imagine this 10 years looking out there is a conveyor belt. And if division wants to buy a new widget, it works best if we plunk it in at the 10-year mark out there. And then the funds are accounted for, it's easy to work with it. As it gets to the budget on the conveyor belt and then basically plops into the budget machine, it's there. We have problems when suddenly we gotta buy, the city has to buy $100,000 or $500,000 thing next year or 2 years from now in short order, because that means we're taking that conveyor belt that's loading up with stuff and saying, we gotta push this back, and we gotta move this off and bump this forward to make room for this purchase.
So Lyle, for the purpose of this evening, are you asking council to look at this and tell you what they feel needs to be moving forward per department, so that you can get the current budget we're working on to present ready? Or, I guess, it's hard to look at this and approve and look at it because we don't know what this year's budget looks like.
Right, I wouldn't say you're approving this as much as you're just
No, I know,
looking at it.
but it's hard to digest.
What I think needs to happen is each department head needs to come up and speak on how their 25-26 budget relates to the CIP and what they want to get accomplished in this next fiscal year. And then we can digest what they're going to be proposed to us in that budget year. So each department has, in the CIP, this is what we want to accomplish in 25-26 budget. What do you guys think of these expenditures? And
Okay.
these are the funding sources.
So you'll get that opportunity. So this CIP discussion now is not something that we've historically done in the past. This is to let council and citizens know this is what's in there. Starting July 7th, is that when we're having the?
July 1st.
July, excuse me, first and
July
then
1st.
10th or something like that. You're gonna hear from these division heads or their, or designees to talk about that exact sort of thing. Then from that, just like we work on this throughout the year, adjust, modify until it's approved, they got their first whack at what they want in their budgets. They submitted it to administration. We've modified that a little bit here and there. You're gonna get that bite at the apple next in the coming weeks, week or two. It's gonna change that, and indirectly, it might change something on here. We might have to bump something forward or back, or add something as well. And it's
Yeah.
completely different deal.
Correct.
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Just, so, on page one, so you get into items like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they all have like a $10,000 trade /sell. What is that actually mean?
Give me an example. What number are you looking at, or give,
2.
line 2 on streets? So trade slash sell. Freightliner, snow plow. So what we have there is a truck, snow plow dump truck that's getting used. And as of now, we're budgeting, anticipating a $10,000 trade-in or sale of that, when that piece of equipment on the old one.
That's it?
That's it, but we budget conservatively. Typically, they're coming a little higher than that, but we don't know for sure. That way, when it comes in to be 20,000, hopefully you're happy.
So going back to start of the meeting, I'm just trying to pinpoint, why are we here?
So my impression, and others can weigh in as well, is that the council wanted to have more involvement, see where we're at in the CIP process throughout the course of the time, over the course of the summer, before we got to budget approval time or budget hearing time. So that's not necessarily the first time you're hearing this. So you don't have to approve anything. This
Right.
is the shot across the bow, if you will say, that this is what we're working on, this is where we're at in the phase, in this stage. And if there's things that, in your wards, that you really want
Okay.
to concentrate on, or a division that you know needs assistance with something, now's the time to bring it up, so we can start factoring that
Steve had a
out.
list. Do we want Steve to run through that list then? Because
There's some things here I can run through off the top of my head, and kind of look at the list. So we'll just look at streets. I'll kind of run down through this here and look at the next couple years. I would say that as staff puts this together, there's a lot of work that goes into, and I would say today, there's not a lot of, we leave room for some of the wants down the road as things walk in the door. We know that some of those things are gonna occur. Land purchases are kind of a want category in a lot of cases, may not be in here, but, let me just kind of walk down through here. As Lyle said, and kind of, recognizing there are new council members here. So line item 2, that's $177,047. We have a $10,000 trade. What that means is we anticipate that's gonna cost $187,000. Net, the $10,000 trade drops that down to $177,000. So, this next year, we're looking at a Freightliner snowplow, and we're looking at a Freightliner 4x4 snowplow, fully outfitted. We've switched over in the last, probably four years or so, purchasing, fully hydraulic snowplows so that we can, actually, while the plow operator's driving down the road, we can work the plow, we can work the sanding system, we can work the salting system, we can work the belly plow, the wing plow, we can work all that stuff. Historically, we've had electric systems or single hydraulic systems where we could do one thing, and then we'd have to go back to the shop, we'd have to switch the hydraulic sender to function something else, and then we'd go out and salt or sand or whatever. So now our systems are much, much more capable. We're able to do a lot more lane miles with an individual plow operator, move that stuff forward. So that's increased that. I would say if you were to back up 5 years, that was probably a $200,000 plow with cost escalations over the last 5 years, plus just outfitting them. We are spending more, but we're getting a lot more and a lot more efficiency on those. As we just go down, we got a bucket truck in there that we'd anticipate replacing this year. Those are used primarily by our 2 electricians that do a lot of signal repair.
Steve?
Yep.
I don't necessarily mean to interrupt, but isn't that the stuff that we get into once we start talking about each department's budget?
We will, yes.
I'm just thinking like today is more,
Right.
here it is, take it home, digest it, ask department heads questions before we get into the budget reading.
Absolutely,
And
feel
then
free to
let's
do that.
tackle those.
But Steve did
So-
bring up a wish list you had on.
So,
that you
right,
had
so on
handwritten.
here,
Yeah.
we are holding money. I'm gonna go down to line item 23, and I'll kind of just highlight some of these items. So line item 23, I'm holding 328,750 on the landscape budget. And that is so that, I know there's a desire for a conversation about doing something at that Highway 81 and 275 corridor. That was Justin Webb had brought that up at our strategic plan. So we are holding some of that here for this next year. The other $500,000 or so, we've pushed out about 4 to 5 years. Some of that, we would anticipate, a small amount of that, probably 200,000 of that, would probably be part of the RAISE grant, project, for some landscaping as a part of that, so some match dollars there. Some of the other, I'm just gonna kind of read down through here, some of the big stuff, and we can see if we got it in there. Skyview dirt roads, Skyview lighting. I don't know, Nathan, did you want to talk about maybe where you're anticipating that? I know there's been some conversation around that, not to put you on the spot, but that's popped up a couple times.
For the Skyview lighting, we received.
If you guys approve it.
Anticipating receiving an estate for that to work on that Skyview lighting on the trails, which has been come up many times. So we want to get started on that project. Is that the one you're talking about, or are you talking about? Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that'll be a donation.
Other funds, one might say.
Yes.
I do got a question. Steve, did you have a
Go right
lot
ahead.
more? Huh?
Yep.
I
Please.
just have, well, and maybe it's with Nate being up here, but maybe explain, I gotta get back to parks here. Maybe explain, because everything has an urgent under it that's under raise grant.
Okay.
So I think that.
You want to go under parks on raise grant?
I'm just looking at page 7, and a lot of A's for urgent are on there, and many of them fall under the raise grant
Yeah.
part of, I mean, there's all kinds of things that
So
has
this
raise grant
is-
in there.
yeah, so this
explain
is-
what raise grant is and why they're urgent.
Yeah, so what you'll find here is lines 21, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Those are both on the parks, and those are on the chaff as well. So our city highway allocation fund has, I think, 3 of the 4, 3 of the 5 of those. And what you'll see on here, if we were to go backwards and look at last year's that didn't have the raise grant, we had several projects in there. Well, they were trail projects scattered throughout the parks. Well, we've taken those dollars out and restructured those now in the raise grant.
Is that raise grant matching funds?
Yes. Okay, so go back up to the beginning line. So each one of these is a different segment of that project. So we'll start here with 20. So this is the segment from US 275.
There you go. Use this and I'll follow along with the cursor.
This number 20 here is Link Norfolk, so it's US 275 crossing, so it's the crossing at Highway 275, and then it's going down 5th Street, it could go down 4th Street, and then running down 1st Street and tying into the Cowboy Trail. So essentially, this piece here is all of that. Line 20 is crossing 275, connecting into the Cowboy Trail. Number 21 is Highway 275 going north to Prospect Avenue. And then you see the Keno dollars and the federal dollars. So it's roughly 10%.
Were these identified in the safe motor transportation?
These were the corridor itself and the improvements in the corridor were identified in our raise grant application.
So is the ask the total with the grant or just what our portion is to match?
Well, the budget here is both, and the Keno function of the budget is the 297,000. So that's our local match for that segment.
Okay.
So the FA is the grant money and the K is the Keno funds.
Correct.
Which is the amount of
FA
money.
is
I
the
guess
federal grant.
My question more was, they all have urgent, and they all have raised grant, so is it needed to be used by a certain date? Is that the reasoning it's, say, next year's?
So this is the grant. The grant, we got a letter of award in January or early February. As a function of the administration change, the grant was put on hold. We're still waiting to hear what's gonna happen with that. We're reasonably positive that it's gonna continue to move forward. There might be some modifications, something they ask us to modify within our project as a function of the award. We're still waiting to hear that. Most recently, within the last year and a half or so, the State Department of Transportation has set up a grants team to work with communities across the state as you're writing these grants and getting awarded these grants. I know Ann has been in contact with them on a fairly regular basis in terms of the status of the grant. And currently the status is I guess it's pending award. They're A, because if the grant comes, then those are gonna be committed. It's not like we're gonna be able to say we can not commit our match. Assuming the grant comes, then those will be committed funds.
Is it fair to, or safe to say, Stephen, that if we have it depicted as an A, as an urgent priority, it might help in the decision on whether we get that versus a B priority or C priority? From the grant reader's perspective?
When we send in for these grants, in fact, Randy's writing a letter right now to go in with the SS4A grant. right now, but we basically write a letter saying that, you know, we have we have the local match dollars committed in our budget. So that's why we show them as A. Line 22 would be improvements on Prospect to Georgia, so 21 got us up to Prospect. Line 22 gets us from Prospect to Georgia, street improvements, drainage improvements. Actually, those would be in the chaff. This portion is related to the trail extension along that segment. 23, and I would say this is also the tunnel. So line 22 includes the tunnel under Highway 81.
Near Georgia,
Near Georgia, yep.
into the city-owned property on the west side.
And
So-
then as we get below that, it's trail kind of connecting over into the trail system at Skyview in 23 and 24.
So it's safe to say that if the grant money does not come through, that, just in this part, we have 1.25 million, I think, it would move off to
Right, so.
budget year 26, 27, or 27, 28, hoping that that grant funds would come through. That's what we're really getting at, and so they're urgent
Correct.
because we're gonna use them for the grant. That's really all I'm asking is,
Right.
why are they urgent? And
Cash, yeah,
is
from
there a deadline for these to be used?
From a cash flow perspective, we're obligating them in 26. We're obligating them to this as a function of this project. If the project doesn't get funded this year, or if it gets funded, but we're not, say we get funded, December, by the time you get through all the grant paperwork and everything, and we get a consultant selected, we're 3/4 of the way through the year, we probably wouldn't expend all that. Those dollars, those encumbered dollars would move into the next fiscal year. Essentially, they would have zero impact because we've already encumbered them. We wouldn't have spent them, but we would have encumbered them.
Right, I think
So there's
I
two
guess one of
different-
the reasons I'm asking the question is we would have to answer to somebody that we're holding back $1.25 million because we have to show that we have the money to
Right, and these dollars here.
put forward towards these grants if the
Yeah.
grants come through.
And these dollars here in some fashion, getting a trail, doing improvements down through Norfolk Junction, getting a trail up 7th Street, those have always been part of the vision. We've had about 50% of those dollars budgeted in here. This now budgets the rest of those dollars. When I took, and I'd be happy to do that, I do have that analysis. When I took all of the line items that were in last year's budget, but in different lines, relative to trails, and I condensed them all down into here, the delta was pretty small. The delta might have been 100,000. Some of the dollars that got, like, one project that was not in this particular segment that got relocated here was, we were carrying, in a trail line, we were carrying about $350,000 for the trail on 37th Street to go from the roundabout down to Cowboy Trail. Those dollars were refocused to here. So that line item in the budget went away. This essentially took priority.
Well, I'm going to speak if I could.
By all means.
I apologize for the confusion and missing the mark on what we were supposed to do here tonight. We're here tonight because we were asked to be here tonight. We were here doing something we've never done before in the spirit of transparency, in the spirit of trying to get a snapshot of time, what we might be looking like in the CIP. After hours and hours of work from the division heads, who are the most expert in what their needs are, delivering a product to you in the spirit of trust, and that you trust them enough that they know what those needs are as a beginning placeholder in time. But not blind trust, because the trust gets validated as the budget process continues, as we get to that point where we match revenues versus
Expenses.
the needs and find out if we can afford to do what this document says. So this is a placeholder in time that gives you a chance, and Councilman Granquist alluded to that, to see this early, identify things you want changed or different, or question the validity of them to make sure that there's accountability amongst all of us that we're doing due diligence to the process. So this is merely that placeholder given to you earlier than ever been done before, as it's been told to me, so that you can see those wants and needs now. And then we have a chance to digest that, modify that, change that as we mesh that into the full budget process and find out if we can afford to pay the bill for the things that those fine people are asking for. So that's what I thought tonight was about, is to give you a chance to see that, digest it, take it home with you, ask hard questions, regurgitate that, and give us a chance to validate those if necessary, go down a different road if necessary, and be better prepared so that you're not seeing this for the first time at those budget meetings where you haven't had any chance to question hard, is it really necessary? Can we afford those things? Or would it be better done a different way? So that's what I thought we were trying to do here tonight. If I missed that and I didn't give our staff better direction, that's on me, and I sincerely apologize to all of you if we missed the mark, because I don't want to waste anybody's time. But there was a lot of hard work by people trying to identify what they thought was the best needs in their division and the priority that they should come from, balanced with the revenue that Randy and Sheila says we have or don't have at this point, at least best of our ability, as we project those things, so that when we get deeper in the budget process, we can talk more factually about this content. So that was the goal. If we miss that, we'll do it different, folks, next time and better. But I do want to thank everybody for listening to that and to the effort that happened by the staff to try to get this ready. A little bit blind because we weren't sure exactly what the target was here. So I apologize for that if we missed the mark. It was done with good intent and trying to be transparent to you all about what we were asking for and why. So with that backdrop, I'll take whatever bullets need to come.
And I think that's good, Scott. And there's two things on here I'll point out, and we don't need to dig into them now. But I would like to talk about the Omaha lift station and just how there's a couple items budgeted there. So I want to talk about line items 4, 5, 6, and 7 on the sewer budget. And then probably on the stormwater budget, I want to talk a little bit about recycle and kind of what we have in the budget for recycle. That conversation is kind of back to the surface, as a function of our recycler operations within the city of Norfolk. But those are a couple items before we would wrap up today I'd like to just touch base on quick. Okay, so on the sewer side, what I want to point out here on the sewer side is items 4, and I've lumped them together now for conversation, but items 4, 5, 6, and 7 are all related. Item 4, and that should be phase 3, I believe is what that should be, is the upgrade of the 275 lift station. Now, in last year, see there's a 0 there, and also on line 7, there's nothing budgeted in there. Last year's budget, we had 1.7 million in for line item 4, and that was in 2027. In line item 7, that's a $3 million project that would probably occur in fiscal year 28, 29. I would say the construction season of 29. I've taken those out because if the Omaha lift station goes into place, that is $4.7 million worth of work that doesn't need to go in the ground. The 1.7 million in line item 4 completely goes away. And the $3 million project in line item 7 probably gets pushed down into 2035, 2040. And so as a function of our budget and our budget model, I personally believe the right answer for East Norfolk is the Omaha lift station. And canning the phase 3 upgrade and pushing out to 2035 or beyond the 36-inch sewer from Bluff. The 36-inch sewer from Bluff becomes important and is connected to the Omaha lift station phase 3, because if we were going to upgrade the pumps in phase 3, we would need to basically replace the 36-inch sewer that runs from Bluff all the way down to the sewer plant, because we're going to be putting a lot more flow into that pipe, and that pipe under that kind of a flow condition would need to be replaced. So by removing the 1.7 million and then just pushing line item 7 down the road 10 years, maybe more, it allows us to focus our revenue models just on the Omaha lift station. What I am projecting as a function of our rate increases on sewer is 6.5% next year. For the last 2 years, we've done 3.5% on residential commercial and 8% on the industrial loading limits, because we had set silent on industrial loading for a while. For the next 3 years, we're looking at 6.5% system-wide, followed by 5.5% in fiscal year 27, followed by 4% then projected all the way out. So this is basically showing about $5 million in other funds. Again, kind of those other funds coming back to either unknown, if we wanted to have some conversation around creating another line item or something in there. We could have that conversation maybe with staff. I think other funding kind of covers it, but and we are having some good conversations right now around some potential funding that we could plug in there and help pay for that. So again, I'd be happy to have any conversations over the next couple weeks around that. If we go down to solid waste, I'll just quickly touch base on the recycle and what I've structured in the budget as a function of recycle. So I am with the budget does anticipate a 4.25% increase in our solid waste fee. We are seeing a reduction of tonnage right now, and in fact, I'm even with a 4.25% increase in fee, I'm projecting being slightly down in revenue next year, depending on what happens with tonnage. Last year, our tonnage was somewhere in the 38,000 pound range. This year, our tonnage is going to be running somewhere around 35,000 pounds. Some of that is a loss due, we had a mechanical failure out there, and so we had to redirect some of the stuff coming from, I'm going to call it Goodyear or Continental. So that's impacting some of our funding. So here's the recycle conversation. What I have is $50,000 for engineering services, essentially, to get a facility layout for recycle, followed in the next year by a 1.5 million revenue bond to build the facility. My understanding and working with the state recycle organization is there's not a lot of interest in assistance with funding for buildings, but once we get the building built, there's plenty of funding out there to help us equip the facility with the articulating forklift, balers, horizontal balers, vertical balers, and so you'll see there are some grant dollars as well as user revenue fees for some of that equipment. What this is intended to be is a facility that can expand. I've spent about the last 4 years looking at these. I sit on the Nebraska Recycle Council Advisory Board. I have for about 5 years now. And so I'm pretty familiar with many of the systems in the state. And what this is an expanded version of the system that's in Laurel. It's a source separation drop-off facility that then can be expanded to function as a hub for source separation drop-off, or it could be a hub for local recycle pickup that would come to the facility for baling purposes. But so again, just big picture, I have structured something in the budget. a little bit this next year, with the bulk of it being in the following fiscal year.
Steve, you said you had a list from the council retreat?
I do.
Also, do you want to read through that?
Just kind of read through that a
Yeah,
little bit and
that'd
remind
be great.
folks? Nord Park Irrigation, that was Corey Hildebrandt, Corey Granquist. Second Access, Legacy Bend, working on that, hope to have second access here this
One second,
calendar
Stephen.
year.
I think, just to,
Yeah,
a quick
yeah.
recap on when, that's why those council retreats are so important. So we use division heads and administration staffs can figure out what you want, and I think this is a perfect example of that. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Nate.
and these are, a lot of these items are under 100,000. They'll be on the budget discussion. We have a lot of items. Most of the things we do are lower costs, so we only have a few things that you're seeing for parks here, but there's a lot of things on the list, and the Nord Park irrigation's on that list, but we're actually we have some funds that we can get that done this year, so we're probably gonna put that out for bid really soon, so be able to get that done this year, I think.
Yeah, even though it's not done like that, it's, the wheels of government turn slow, but that's a product of what.
25th Street, north of
Steve,
Benjamin
can I
Avenue.
Steve, can I interrupt
Skyview
for a
Dirt-
second? Steve,
Yep.
hold on one second. I've advocated for the council to have a better understanding of the CIP, so I think this is good to get this document, and then the council get some eyes on it and bring this to the budget and ask questions, but I appreciate this meeting and I appreciate this document, but I think the council needs to have a better understanding of CIP. I've always asked for that since I've been on council, so I encourage everyone to take this document, read it, influence it, put what you'd like to see, and give it to the department heads and.
Yeah, we're gonna
about it, so.
talk about it again in the next coming
Yeah.
months anyway. So, and
But I gotta get going, so I'll
Okay.
leave here pretty quick.
like Scott said, this is new.
You know, Justin, you had the biggest
need to-
list.
If we don't need this in the future, that's fine. If we want to modify how it approaches in the future, that's fine. We just got to start somewhere, and we'll tweak it.
And I can certainly, I mean, I'll just read through this quick, but I can certainly put this, into an email and send it out so you guys have it too. 25th Street north of Benjamin Avenue, that's in process. Light the trails at Skyview, regional mayor's meeting, running red lights, street repairs, residential neighborhoods, painted crosswalks, Miller Park needs TLC, Highway 81, 275 corridor landscaping, Parks Endowment Foundation Fund, ED strategic plan, recycling program, airport, make decisions, council-driven CIP, extreme blight, stockyard area, energy storage, city trash service, recycling program, Johnson Park, BB Court, increased boundary of the 25-mile-an-hour zone, Washington Avenue, gap paving. Sue.
Yes, that was on my list. That was on my list.
Burrs and flood control, thistles and burrs and flood control. Number 3, parks. And then there were some public comments that came up, again, some senior center conversation. So those were my notes from that. And I think in large part, we have many of those are being addressed or are in the budget to be addressed.
Well, thank you
Other
for
thoughts or
running through
questions?
things, Steve, and getting that out in front of us. I think we're at a point where we understand what tonight's meeting was about. Obviously, we started off on the wrong foot a little bit. That's probably my fault more than anything. But Scott had a great response to that. So, I noticed that you have on here, 1 and 6 year plan for street improvement. Did you want to go through that yet, or is?
The
Is
1 and
that-
6 year, so the 1 and 6 year street program is essentially the first 6 years of the 10-year capital improvement program. Again, the city highway allocation fund, the bottom of the city highway allocation fund does have the RAISE grant. It also has the SS4A grant. So when you look at, here's those exact same line items for the RAISE grant. And the RAISE grant is, I believe the RAISE grant is the current version of what was the Tiger grant, and it changes names every time it comes out. 6 years, if you want to go down the bottom there, you'll see the SS4A grant is plugged in at 2 million. There's a $2 million local match specific line item for that. The total grant for this would be about $3 million on the SS4A street grant. The other $500,000 or so would be up in our maintenance area. We'd be improving some street sections that would not need maintenance, so there's about $500,000 in maintenance. $300,000 toward the $3 million grant would be coming out of the landscaping fund, and another $200,000 we anticipate coming out of public safety. Well, let's just go back up to line 1 on chaff, and we'll look here at the kind of those first 6 years. Lines 1 and 2, those are the dollars for street maintenance by contract. We program that at $1 million a year. I think it does bump up to 1.1 a couple years down the road there. Line 3, bridge maintenance. I think that shows up about year 6 in the program. I think there's 350,000 there, out there, yeah, fiscal year 30. Just focusing on what's in the next 6, we go down to line 6. We have a $500,000 in armor coat, chip seals for 26, another $500,000 out in 2030. Line 7, Benjamin Avenue, Victory Road intersection. We know we need to do an intersection improvement there, and so we've got some dollars for engineering in 27, followed by some dollars for utility relocation in 28, followed by construction out there in 2030, wrapping up in 31. The next line item is 25th Street north of Benjamin Avenue. Show wrapping up the engineering this year. Probably be some utility relocates. We'd have some temporary construction easements to acquire, so that would all be going on fiscal year 27. Anticipate construction 28. We are going to be starting meeting with landowners here that are anybody that's adjacent to the project. We'll start meeting with them in July. Next, traffic signal heads. Those are some traffic signal head improvements just across our system. Community decided street repairs. We've pushed that out beyond the 6-year program right now. We'll see, how the police station goes, but we anticipate as that wraps up that we would move that project forward.
So the community that had put input on the street repairs, basically you're saying we're going to push them back because it's not important?
No, we're pushing it back. Originally, that was going to be a bonded $25 million or bonded $5 million project.
So we're waiting 5 years for the community.
So when the community group got together to talk about funding the police station, the conversation coming out of that committee was not to bond, but to do the police station tax, and then get the police station constructed and then use any residual dollars towards those. Now, we are looking at the project. Some of those projects in there were high need, and so we are working on those. Some of those higher need areas. First Street was one of the projects that was in there. Well, we've pretty much got First Street, the concrete repair done. There'll be a little bit of more work there we're going to do on First Street.
So some of this will be more discussed with the...
Yeah. Also, council has, there's $200,000 a year in council priority going into the city highway allocation fund. That's going into some of those areas. So that $5 million, I would say, I could pretty confidently say at this point, that $5 million is all residential streets, intersection repairs, panel repairs, all residential. Industrial Road Extension West, that's a partnering with the county to identify a corridor for the westerly extension of Industrial Highway. Next, mill and overlay maintenance. We have $500,000, just a line item, $500,000 for mill and overlay. Usually we end up pulling some dollars, 250,000 or $500,000 out of our street maintenance by contract to buffer that a little bit. Transportation master plan, our transportation master plan, the last one was 2006. Been bouncing that one around a little bit. I had it out there about 6 years. I brought it back. I do think as a function of, economic development, transportation, with the crush plant coming in, the conversation of industrial road extension to the west, I think it's time we readdress our transportation master plan.
But we're having cooperation with the county, that industrial road.
That industrial road, yeah, that 75,000 is intended to be a 50-50 split, so
Okay,
the
so
county.
75% or 75,000 are.
Yeah, 150 total for us and 150 total for them.
Okay.
Yep. Center Drive, Michigan Avenue. $350,000, so those are some just street repairs, Center Drive, Michigan Avenue. We go down Madison Avenue, so I wanted just to touch base on Madison Avenue. 1, 2, 3, 4, so that needs to be completely replaced, Madison Avenue from 18th to St. Mary's. And so starting the engineering on that to design a full replacement, 29, finish up the engineering in 30, looks like go to construction in 32. And construction across a couple of years there, 32, and then again in 33. At that time, I'm looking at the cul-de-sacs that come off of that to the north. Those have deteriorated to the point they need full replacement as well. We might try to accomplish those as part of our street maintenance line items 1 and 2. Beyond that, we got some gap paving. Right now, that's centered around Jefferson and Northwestern. Sue has mentioned a need on the Washington one. On the gap paving is set up to be assessed. So we do the engineering, we do the construction, and the adjacent landowners pay for that. I do want to have some conversation as we would head into that and consider Washington Avenue. I do think as we talk context-sensitive design, maybe Washington Avenue doesn't have to be a curb and gutter street. Maybe there's a different way to do Washington that accomplishes the goals and reduces the cost of that a little bit. Just because of the nature of that area and what it is serving, I just think we want to be sure we're putting the right solution in on that one. Sort of the same on Northwestern. Is that a concrete curb and gutter street, or could we get by with just an overlay, an asphalt overlay in that or something? Jefferson's a little bit different. I think that's curb and gutter to extend Jefferson.
So you talked about assessments and that following on in. When we run up against the railroad, are they accessible or not?
Well, they're an adjacent landowner.
Are they accessible?
I don't know. That's.
I know
I would
when
think
the
so, as long, if we can.
conversation came up many years ago about Washington, I don't remember if you were on the council, it was that the railroad was not accessible. So,
They have unique powers.
What project were you talking about there, Jim? Do you remember?
Washington,
The
gap
Washington
paving,
project?
Yeah.
that was maybe 16 or so when that came up.
Yeah.
And it died because, they said, well, they're not accessible, and so it was going back to the property owners down there, and it's not really an area that can double, it can double up. You know,
Yeah.
it's not that, they should be able to afford their half, that were their side, but you can't afford both sides.
Yeah. Lines 19 and 20, those are the state highway, those are the NDOT projects. That is our match on those projects. It's about 5% of the actual cost. So that's a pretty good partnership there. And then from there you get down into the raise grant.
Machine engineering must be starting on Seventh Street this year for a 275 in the roundabout. Would that be right? Item number 23.
23?
That would assume the grant comes through, then we would start, yes.
Okay, and if that grant, no, that's part of the raise grant.
Yes.
And we're pretty confident that's gonna happen?
I think, I am, to the extent we were already awarded, we were the only project in the state of Nebraska, or the only community to receive a raise grant,
Because we were shovel ready or what?
because they liked our project.
Okay.
We had enough, historically, we've had enough conversation around that. We've prepared our active transportation plan. We've been doing a lot of legwork, I'd say over the last 5 years, around bits and pieces of it. And it was pretty easy for us to pull all these different things we've been working on and present a concept for a solid project to link, again, it's linking western side of the community over into the eastern side of the community, into the southern side of the community. It's allowing access, safe access for citizens and population to get into public services that are kind of centralized in this area from the south and from the west, in a safe manner outside of a vehicle. And so it was received very well.
Other thoughts or comments, questions?
Thanks, Steve.
Otherwise, this is, generally speaking, what you'll be seeing here when we go through this process again in a month or so, month or two. All right.
I just want to hit one last thing. I think Scott said it well. This is exactly what I'm thinking it is. It's just for us to review it and us to ask questions. And I appreciate every one of you guys putting this together. This isn't for me, I guess, I don't think for any of us is to point fingers. We had a few good questions that I think could have been brought up here, but from that, it's our due diligence to look through this. And this meeting was probably more for us to get it in public, and the public now has this. And we all have that information to ask questions, or the public has, this information to ask us questions, and then go through to department heads or straight to Scott or whatever it might be. So I think this did what it was supposed to do, even though we're all sitting here and you're all not necessarily coming up to talk, but it's more just to give us information and move forward, so we have a better budget hearings as we go forward, rather than a surprise budget hearings of, I haven't really looked through this, or I don't have enough information to make a good decision.
And we also asked to bump this up. So this is
Right.
to prepare this at a sooner schedule than we traditionally do. So we are seeing this sooner than usual, and that helps us when we move into the budget part of this session. So we do
Yeah.
appreciate that.
The better that you can communicate with division heads, administrative staff, the better a product that can be produced all the way through the process.
And so for me, I do apologize for the way I started the meeting off. It's the first time we've done this like this. And so when you
right.
go to a meeting, you always want to have purpose.
Yeah.
And so when you're sitting here, you're like, what is the purpose? What are we getting at? Are we wasting people's time? We went from kind of a little bit of a frustration part to a very good meeting, so.
It's charting new waters. Now
Exactly. And now we'll know what to do next year.
That's exactly right.
Thank you for the presentation, Lyle.
No problem. Thank you for the opportunity.
Lyle?
So we will say, is anybody from the public have anything to say?
Military grade pointer.
I see one. All right, so with that, we will adjourn.